Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 24 of the anime series Arslan Senki, or the heroic legend of Arslan. And this episode was all kinds of badass. I mean, the battle is finally ensuing between the two opposing factions of Arslan and Silver Mask Hetamus, respectively. Those Parsian forces, as well as a mixture of Lusitanian Parsian forces, held within the Keep of St. Emmanuel as we left off. And I love that we're picking up right where we left off, with Itole confronting Arslan and being sort of incredulous. You know, I'm not going to take home the head of this peasant boy. Where's Arslan and all this stuff? And Arslan is pimp. He just walks right up to her, does not grab any sort of weapons. He remains unarmed, even though she's still packing a sword, gets right up in her face and says, "I'm Arslan." You know, just such a pimp moment for him. He's come a long way from the timid boy, the timid waif prince that we began the series with. And of course, she very much reacts one of the two ways I thought she would. She's on the attack. She goes to slicing him, and Elam intervenes. He actually gets wounded for it. And I hope it's not a mortal wound, because Elam's a cool character. But it just goes to show, you know, here is a slightly more background character than the main sort of focused upon characters. And the loyalty he shows for Arslan's cause, the belief in the hope and the promise of Arslan ascending the Parsian throne. He's willing to risk his life for Arslan in that moment, and he may just as well have. Again, hopefully that's not the case. But they end up chasing off, you know, Itole as a result of this, and they figure out Alfred basically follows her, and they find out there's like a hidden passage that leads back to the keep, and they can actually get on the inside, which comes very much into play when they finally make their move on the Keep of St. Emmanuel. But I think it's absolutely just, you know, mind-numbing and perturbing the way the Itole character is in her stringent belief of this Yaldabaoth faith. And, you know, this series has been very much commentary-laden with the brainwashing and the lack of self-resolve one must basically have to be so all consumed by this religious faith and see no one else in existence as being anything less than a heathen, a mongrel, something to be put to death unless they accept that faith. It's mind warping, and Itole being a character very much skirting that line, because she's very much faithful. She's looking at Arslan even as she's realizing, you know, all the time she spent with him. Look at the one episode they were together and he helped her escape, and yet she's calling back on it as though it was a disservice to her. A distrustful manipulation via the heathen that is Arslan. And so she's a crackpot, essentially, and I hate that about her. Even though I want to champion her character, she's very much testing my patience every time she's on screen. And of course, because of Alfred's little faction following her back to the keep, you know, they find a way in, they open the gates, and this is when Arslan, he proves himself that much further, not just being pimp and getting up in Itole's face, but also because he wants to be on the battlefield. Very much in the battlefields that have unfolded previously, he has stayed behind, or he has not been involved. He's stayed up on a mountainside watching, you know, the soldiers do the work for him. And very much does he feel the sense of morale and hope, and wanting to bring hope to the soldiers, to let them know what they're fighting for, to remind them of the hope in their cause, and to be that morale boost. You know, as sort of the figurehead of the movement, he is very much the figurehead of this movement. And so he wants to be there for the people who are going to be risking their lives for that cause, for him specifically. And I love that sort of hillside chant. They show him in silhouette on horseback. He raises his sword to the sky and he's chanting, and just he invigorates the entirety of this Parsian force behind him. And it gave me goosebumps. I was like, oh, hell yes. It was like the first high point of the episode, which only then compounds because you have almost like an RPG aesthetic where you've selected this party of, like, say, 7 people, and each one of them is going off to do a specific task as they're entering the keep. Once they've gotten inside, you see those 3 characters I've referred to as the 3 amigos a couple episodes back, charging their forces internally to the Keep of St. Emmanuel. You have Arslan and Daryun being very much, you know, side by side as Narcissus goes off to fight Sam. And then, of course, you have Ferengis going up against the other bow and arrow soldiers, you know, inside. And once they get inside, of course, you see them confronting not only Silver Mask, but the head of the Keep of St. Emmanuel himself. Barshon, I think, is his name. But he's very much, you can see he's very much disconcerted by what's unfolding. And he's mulling over, he's uncertain about what, avenues he wants to take, what steps he wants to take, as he's listening to the verbal joust going back and forth between Arslan, hidden behind Aryun, and Silver Mask about the rightful heirship to the throne and all this kind of stuff, the rightful bloodlines, and how you're heathenous if you don't agree with it, and all this kind of stuff. And you basically hear from Arslan's side that it's not just about me and my wants. It's about the benevolence, the benefits for all of our people, and he actually tries to sort of, it comes off as a jibe, but he tries to get Hermes to agree to that fact that, maybe his outlook is not just self-contained to his own sense of vengeance, but maybe it's actually that he wants to think of his people, which, at least through the course of this anime series has not been the case at all. He's been very much of his own accord, very selfishly motivated by vengeance and seeking revenge. And so you see the conflict on the head of the keep. Basically he's listening to Arslan. He's like, wow, maybe there's some truth to this young man being sort of a benevolent benefactor, someone who actually does care for the greater good and would be the more hopeful successor to the Persian throne. But there's not much he can really do about it. And of course, my favorite, the second high point of this episode, my favorite aspect of this episode, in its sheer badassery, was the one-on-one fight, the sword fight between Aryun and, of course, Silver Mask Hermes, just on the edge of my seat. That was a freaking brilliant sequence. They go out the freaking window, they're scaling down the wall. They're in the garden and they're one-upping each other. Silver Mask knocks Daryun's, helmet off and all this kind of stuff. And then it seems like they've both equally mortally wounded each other, sliced their sides, much like we saw with Elam earlier, the fate he suffered from Atole's sword. And all of a sudden, those dark sorcerer spirits, whatever they are, encompass Silver Mask. And he's like, no, I'm not dying here today, and you're not dying here today. I'm not going to let you die until you are fully resigned and accepting to the fact that you are wholly beaten once and for all. And he just disappears. They whisk him away, much like they did the singular, dark sorcerer spirit did Xandis in the previous episode. And Daryun just like, what the F? What happened here? And of course, adding to that incredulity of the brainwashing and the siphoning out of one's own self-will in this religious faith. Basically, Arslan is looking across, the court and seeing this tower where all of these women who are of that faith, who have been staying here, I don't know if it's like a nunnery or they're just the inhabitants of this keep, but they're on this tower top and they're praying to their god, wishing to meet their God because they don't want to live a life under some other rule or seeing their faith disbanded or whatever it is. And they walk off. They try to almost sacrifice or martyr themselves. And it's like, I'm with Arslan. I want to scream out, what are you doing? It's over. There's no more fighting. You don't need to do this. And even the head of the keep himself pulls his own dagger to kill himself, and conveniently, as Arslan is trying, struggling, pleading with him not to do this, the guy manages to slice himself and he walks over the edge, plummeting to his doom. And there he is, Arslan left with the dagger in hand, and who walks in? Atole. And then, of course, she's, after just being stunned for a few seconds, and Arslan is still stunned, we leave off with that cliffhanger. It seems like she's going to lunge right at him to try to kill him. And what the hell is going to happen next, really? I mean, I think we've got one final episode left, and I can't wait to see how this is going to be resolved. I think we're not going to get any further than, this Keep of Saint Emmanuel as far as the story unfolding, the battle ensuing between Arslan and Silver Mask. I think they're probably going to leave a lot of that undone for a potential future season, or maybe it's the coinciding. There's a game that was either released already or is yet to be released that you play, where you play as characters from this series and it's based on the series. I don't know if the story continues therein or, how this all plays out exactly. I've heard in comments back and forth that I've had the conversation with you guys, the viewers, that a lot of this series is not following strictly the original story, and even the original anime OVA adaptations is quite different and everything like that. And so I don't know if this is rounding up to its own unique ending, if it's going to be a thorough conclusion, or they're going to leave it open-ended so that they can, you know, tell more of the story in another anime or a movie or whatever. But I'm really curious. I'm really curious to see where they're going to end and how open-ended they're going to leave it. Are they going to give us a sense that Arslan has succeeded and his, you know, ascension to the throne is a sure thing? Or are they going to leave it so that, you know, we know that this isn't the conclusion of the story and there's still much more to go through before Arslan can achieve that? Remains to be seen. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you thought of episode 24 of Arslan Senki, if you've seen it, if you enjoyed it as much as I did. Specifically, the all kinds of badass Daryun versus Silver Mask battle. It's one of my favorite battle sequences, especially a one-on-one battle sequence that I've seen in a long time in anime. And Gangsta being just, you know, the current equivalent of time and time again doing that in recent years anyway. It's been a long time coming, seeing a sequence this, you know, built up over so much time and so invigorating and satisfying to see it come to its culmination, and I can only hope we build off from there in the finale. So yeah, otherwise, like I say, I'd like to hear from you in the comments below what you thought of this episode, and that'll be pretty much it for me on it, so I'll catch you all later. Peace.